Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar. So today we'll be walking through how to migrate Baicells ENodeB onto SAS using Google SAS portal and the Baicells Cloud Core. So first of all the data that will be covered today, all the information and everything will be is already there on the website, and it's under the documents section. So if you go to our website of baicells.com and then go to support documents and then go to configuration, sorry, let's see, it should be somewhere here. Huh. Yeah, sorry, I just missed that. So it's under solutions, under configurations and solutions, and then you can see it as CBRS SAS and SAS deployment guide. Just click on the download button and the guide will get downloaded. So if you miss any information today, you can always find it there or reach out to us. Now let's go to the ENodeB itself. So if you worked with the Baicells ENodeB, then you know this is how the login page looks like. The default password is admin, and you log into it. And today I'm going to be using the Baicells MBS 1100 ENodeB, which is our NOAA 233 Gen 1 base station. And you can see that right now the SAS status is disabled on my ENodeB, and it's also active. So it's right now working on part 90 and not part 96 because the SAS has been disabled. Now I'll walk you through how to migrate this from disabled status to enable and then connect with SAS. So the first thing you want to make sure is that your ENodeB is connected to the OMC and that it's communicating with it. So when I log into my Cloud Core account here, just a moment. So under ENodeB monitor, I should be able to see my ENodeB online. So let's just take the serial number from here. Put it here. So as you can see, my ENodeB is connected and is online on the OMC. For SAS settings, what I would have to do is go to Advanced and then SAS. So from here, I can see which ENodeBs are already registered, which are transmitting and which are unregistered with SAS. So for making ENodeB work with SAS, you have two different options. So for that, let's go to the ENodeB and then LTE and then SAS settings. So right now it's disabled. I'm going to enable it. And then you have two options here. You have multi-step and you have single step. So we can start with single step. So the difference between single step and multi-step is that that when you're choosing single step on the base station, all the configuration that you do is on the ENodeB itself. You do not need to use the Google SAS portal or any other SAS portal at all. Everything can be done from the ENodeB GUI itself. Okay. And when you're going to use multi-step, then what happens is you only need to put in a few things like your user ID, FCC ID, and the antenna gain, and select the category. Rest of the stuff, everything has to be done on the Google SAS portal. So you log into your Google SAS portal and then you fill in all the information required to make the ENodeB and the SAS portal talk to each other. So we'll see both. We'll first do single step and then we'll migrate on to multi-step. So before you start with single step, what you'll need is you'll need your user ID, you will need the FCC ID and a bunch of information that we'll walk through. And then the most important thing is you will need your CPI information. So a CPI is a certified professional installer, and you get your CPI certificate when you finish your CPI certification with the SAS vendor that you've been working with, either Google or Federated or Amdocs. So the first thing you need to make sure is that you have your CPI information handy before you actually start the migration process. And you'll only have the CPI info once you are a certified professional from one of these SAS vendors. So let's begin the process. I enable the SAS. I put it on single step. Now this is a category B base station, so I'm going to put it as category B. It is an outdoor base station, and all of the outdoor base stations are usually category B. So when you're using an outdoor ENodeB, you don't need to check it. You'll know that it's a category B. But the main identifying factor between a category A and B is the power limits. So it's always good to check if which category your ENodeB or CPE falls under before you start the process. And everything is covered in the SAS deployment guide, and we'll also walk you through like which category the equipment is. This is an outdoor base station, which is a 1 watt transmission power per port. So it's a category B base station. So you choose category B, and then you can put your CPI info. For us, I'll just use this our information. I'll also log into another base station which has information, so I can just copy it from there. Okay, so yeah, so that's Baicells. And we already put Baicells here. So FCC ID, you can go to our website, baicells.com, and then go to support and then product registration. And then you can choose the base station or the CP that you're onboarding, and you will find the FCC ID there. So today, since I'm using Nova R9, I'm gonna be using the first equipment here, and I can see the FCC ID on the topmost row. So I just copy paste from there. You can manually enter the GPS coordinates, but since the ENodeB is connected to GPS, I just click on auto and it will populate the coordinates automatically. You'll have to put the mounting height of the antenna. So I'm just going to put, and this is in meters, so I'm just going to put 20 for today because this is a test deployment. For the antenna, again, I'm going to put 15. Azimuth, let's say 65. Antenna downward, let's put it as, let's say 90. And then antenna beam width. So you need to know all this information beforehand, right? You need to know what's the mounting height of the antenna, what's the antenna gain, what's the down tilt, what's the beam width of the antenna that you're using. You don't need to use the call sign or the group type which says the interference coordination. Then you go on to put your CPI information. So give me a second, I'll pull up my CPI information here real quick. I can just copy paste it from here. Let's see. And then you can just click on auto and it will automatically tell you the install certification time. So you don't need to type in everything in the format that's listed in the text below the box. And then you save this information. Once it's saved, what we'll do is we'll upload the CPI certificate. So let me find my CPI certificate. One second, guys. So you click on Add Change CPI Certificate. Sorry, 1 second. I think I lost connectivity to the ENodeB. So I'll just show you on the other ENodeB I have here. So when I click on Add Change Certificate, it will take me to the CPI certificate upload section. And then I just click on the select file, browse it from my computer. I then click on P12 file pattern and then put in my password. And that's it. I can see my certificate uploaded on the ENodeB itself. And once that is done, all I have to do is come back here and then make sure all the settings are correct under the LTE SAS settings section. So I'm on single step, category B, I put my user ID, FCC ID, every other field is populated, I put my CPI information, so we're all good. So once this step is done, what should happen next is that when I go on to the OMC, I should see the process start. So let's go to the quick info page and then select the serial number here, and I put the serial number on the OMC. And as you can see, I found my ENodeB under Advanced SAS Settings, and then before that, one other thing you need to do is, if this is the very first time that you're onboarding with Baicells, what you need to do is under Advanced SAS, you go to this tool option here that says Settings, and then select your SAS provider. So since we're using Google today, I'm going to be selecting Google, but you also have Federated, Amdocs, CommScope, and Google to choose from. And then once that is done, then you go to the install parameters. Just make sure everything is correct. I did select single step, so that's correct. I'm reading the CPI information from the ENodeB directly, and all the information is populated here. So all that is good. Once that's done, I just go to procedure, and you'll see that it will automatically start. Before you would have started, it should be under unregistered. And once you've started the process, it will go from unregistered to registered to granted to authorized. And then it will, once it's authorized, then and gets a grant from the SAS portal, it will open itself for transmission. Before that, it will be in the unregistered state. So this means that my ENodeB is currently working with SAS, and I can check that from the SAS portal. So all I need to do is go to the SAS portal, enter my serial number, and then select the serial number, and then you can see that under status option, you'll see that it has received a grant. And since this is a 436Q and I'm using it in carrier aggregation mode, I can see that it got a 40 megahertz grant from the SAS, and it's just selected the first available channel that is there. So this is how you will verify it for the single step. We didn't have to do anything on the SAS side. We only had to do the configuration on the ENodeB side, right? So that's single step. And for multi-step, what I'll have to do is I go back to the ENodeB and then click on SAS settings and then change single step to multi-step. And then this time what I have to do is select the category which is the same, the user ID, which will be the same as before. And then I have my FCC ID. And then again, that's it. These are the 4 things that I need to put in, and then click on save. Once that is done, then you go back to the OMC and you see right now my just a few minutes back my ENodeB was in transmission. Now it went back to the registration step because I changed the method of registration. I went from single step to multi-step, so it will start the whole process again. So now it's gonna start registering, and then it will be very quick this time because I already registered it once. But if you're registering it for the first time, it will take a minute or two before it actually goes through the whole process, and then it will reboot your base station because you're getting a new frequency, and the reboot will take anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes. So total of time that you will see it taking is around 3 to 4 minutes from unregistered to the transmission state, which is also accounting for the ENodeB reboot. So for this multi-step, apart from making the settings here, what other thing I have to do is I have to register it on the SAS portal. So let me do one thing here. Let me delete this ENodeB from the SAS portal and then show you what it would take for a new multi-step registration. So I'll just relinquish the whole grant. All right, we have deregistered. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable SAS on this ENodeB, and then I'm going to right. So now I've deleted the ENodeB. Right. So this is a clean slate for us now. So this ENodeB is not on the SAS portal, and it's on multi-step. So what we have to do is we have to register this ENodeB on the SAS portal. So what I'm going to do is register this as if it were a new ENodeB. So I'll take my serial number, and then I'm going to say import. Sorry. Okay, so there are so I'm going to add one more ENodeB, and then we can just, this is optional, this is just for you to know which ENodeB it is. It has a category B, then I put the serial number in here. And since this is a 436Q that we're dealing with, so I'm going to take the FCC ID from here, which says 436Q from the website, and then put the FCC ID in there. And then what I need to do is, so all these things that I'm putting in here are optional. They don't need to be put in, like the EIRP, but I do need to put the height. So let's say 20, like we did before. Azimuth is, let's say 90, and then mechanical down tilt, I'll just put 0. That should be all. You don't need to select this parameter. For radio technology, we'll select EUTRA, and then supported spec will put LTE in. For the ENodeB information, you can go back to the ENodeB and select the firmware version, and you'll need to put the hardware version, but if you intend to, you can do that. It's not mandatory, but you can put it in anyway. Model is MPS 31101. Okay, so I'll just check everything. I'll say category B, user ID, FCC ID, serial number. I don't need to put the antenna model. I have to put the beam width. So I'll put that as 65. Then I don't need to put the EIRP because it's all there tagged with the FCC ID, but I'll put it anyway. So the important things are your user ID, FCC ID, serial number, and then you put your beam width in. You put your physical height, azimuth, down tilt. Then you put the radio interface. You put the supported specification. CBSD information is not needed. So if you don't want, you don't need to put that in. So I'll just remove this. And then since I am a CPI, I can sign it. So if you are not a CPI, Google will not let you sign it. So you need to make sure that you are a CPI. So since I'm using Jason's account and he's a CPI certified, he's a CPI, so he has his identity verified already. That's why I'm able to sign it. But in case you are not a certified CPI, you can fill all this information in, but Google will not let you sign it. So to sign the information, you need to be a CPI. Remember that. Doesn't need informing 0. All right, so I'm signed here. Now it's waiting for registration. Let's go back to the ENodeB and then turn on SAS. Because remember, we turned it off before so that it looks like it's a new registration process. So I have multi-step, I have SAS on, I have my user ID, FCC ID, antenna again, and then I'll just save it. Once that is done, I go back to the cloud core, and now I check the procedure. It'll take a minute before it actually syncs with the OMC. Let's do this. All right, so you can see you're on multi-step, and then all the information that was entered from the base station is on the OMC. If it's taking time, you can just manually turn SAS on as well. So there you go, SAS is turned on now. And then I go to procedure. And then you have to wait for it to register with SAS. There you go. You see now, since it's already there on the SAS portal, it went through the whole process from being unregistered into transmission mode. Since this ENodeB is using the same frequency, so you'll see an option here that says, sorry, you'll see an event here that says parameter value not change. So open radio immediately. That means I did not change frequency or power. So or PCI, any of that information. So that's the reason my ENodeB went immediately into the transmission board. But if SAS changes the frequency or it changes the power, then it won't go immediately into the transmission mode. It will be in the authorized mode and send a signal to the ENodeB to restart the ENodeB. And then the ENodeB will go into transmission after it comes back from the reboot. Now there are a few things here that will be helpful. So these are the logs for your ENodeB. So you can see what happened with timestamps. Earlier we relinquished and then deregistered the ENodeB so that it looks like a complete new process for the walkthrough. So you will see those events here. Then I registered it successfully just a few minutes back. So you will see that. Then it went for a spectrum inquiry. You will see that event. It was granted, and then you will see that the ENodeB has been opened successfully for transmission. Now, if you want to find a log for a particular ENodeB from a bunch of ENodeBs that you have online, you can do that as well. So let's remove the serial number here. So this is how the page looks like, right? So you go to the logs section here, and then you put the serial number in, and it will show you all the events only for that serial number on the OMC. So you will see all the data that's being transmitted between the ENodeB and the SAS. So you will see what relinquishment request, what data it's sending in the packet, right? And then you will see, like, for the spectrum inquiry response. So it, as you can see, it gave me a bunch of frequencies, right? It gave me all the available frequencies, all the available GA frequencies here. Since I don't have a preference, it just selected the first available frequency that was, and that was given to me in the grant. And you will see in the grant that there is no error, and you will see the expiry time of the grant. And also in the grant request, you will see that which frequency I'm choosing from a bunch of available frequencies. So it's the very first frequency, since I don't have any preference here, that one got selected, and that's my grant request. And the SAS gave me the same frequency, the one that I requested for. And you can check that from the SAS portal as well. So if you see here, you will see that it gave me the frequency, the first available frequency in the whole of the spectrum. And the same thing can again be seen on the OMC as well. So there's a bunch of different places you can check the same thing on. So this is the ENodeB that we have, and it shows me the center frequency. And then it shows me that I'm in the transmission mode. It will show me the power spectral density, and here's the grant that you will see. So you see the entire grant listed here, and then you will see the grant expire time as well. Right. So these are the typical SAS features, but there are few features which are special and specific to Baicells. So let's walk through those related to SAS. So this is simple single step and multi-step we talked about. Now, if you want to fine tune this, as in you want to set a preferred frequency, the frequency of your choice, and ask SAS or request SAS that please give me this frequency if it's available. And also the power, if you want to decrease the power, you don't want to transmit at full power, and you want to ask SAS to give you that amount of power, and also bandwidth, you can choose all those things. So all you have to do is go to quick settings, and then you have to choose the logic. So right now my logic is power, bandwidth, frequency. So first preference power, second bandwidth, third frequency, right? I can change this. Let's put frequency, bandwidth, and then power. So my most important priority is frequency right now. So I'll put frequency in the first order, and then I'll go for bandwidth and then power. And you can choose from a bunch of different orders if you want to, which are all listed in the drop-down menu. I just select frequency, bandwidth, and power. I'll let the preferred power be the highest power available, but you can go down until you actually can go down until 0, but I'm sure no one wants that when they're working in a live environment. So let's just leave it at 30 for now. And since this is a 436Q, you have a primary cell and a secondary cell, but I already have a priority listed here, but so let's remove that for now. And then I'll choose something on the higher side. So let's say I want to choose 3680, and I can put 3690 here. Okay, and then I have a 20, sorry, there has to be a 20 megahertz gap. So I'll put 3670 here and do that. I can change this from 10 megahertz to 20 megahertz to 15, but for now I'll leave it at 20 megahertz preferred bandwidth and leave the primary cell request at 3670 and the secondary cell request at, hold on, it should be 3690. Yeah. Okay. So there you go. That's our priority. Save that. make sure your priority is listed there. Okay. So, and then there's a legacy mode. So there are some CPEs like the Cat4 Gen 2 CPEs that do not have the range of band 48. They just say band 42, band 43. So for making them work, what we did is we added a legacy mode. So you're getting a band 48 frequency from the SAS, and your CPEs are going to be on band 48. What is going to change is the EARFCN. So EARFCN are the channel number that are attached to a particular band. So if I put this on legacy mode, they'll be using a different channel number. Now, using the same frequency that SAS assigned them, they're not going to use a band 43 frequency. The only thing that changes is the channel number, which will not have any impact on any performance or it's not violating any SAS rules. It's just changing the channel number so that the CPE understand which channel number the ENodeB is operating on. So that's the only difference. Keep in mind, you're still going to be using the same frequency that you got assigned by SAS. So you're not breaking any rules here. So let's turn this on to true and then click the save. All right, so my ENodeB is already restarted because it probably went through the whole SAS procedure. There you go. So now you guys can see that I was a little late turning the legacy mode on, so I'm still getting a band 48 frequency, but I did get assigned a new frequency. So that's the reason my ENodeB is in the authorized mode and it has started rebooting. So this is what you will actually see for the very first time you're onboarding the ENodeB on SAS, or when SAS decides to, when the grant expires and SAS decides to give you a new frequency, it will go back from the transmission to the authorized state and then be there until the reboot finishes and the GPS syncs before you actually head on to the transmission state. So we'll have to give it a few more minutes before it comes back onto the transmission state. But yeah, that's actually the complete walkthrough, and we can actually open the floor for any questions right now. So Angela, you can let us know if there are any questions.
Great, thank you, Natisha. Yeah, there are a few questions. So here's one question. What is the difference between single-step and multi-step registration?
Sure. So the single step and multi-step registration is basically in single step registration, what you do is you make all the settings on the ENodeB, and you do not touch the SAS, need to touch the SAS portal at all. So as we've seen here, all the installation parameters are on the ENodeB itself, be it your height, antenna gain, frequency range, everything is there on azimuth, antenna azimuth, down tilt, CPI information, everything has to be done from the ENodeB end. No need to touch the SAS portal at all. For the multi-step, what you need to do is just turn on the SAS on the ENodeB and put in a few key parameters like the FCC ID, the user ID, antenna gain, and rest of the stuff has to be inputted on the SAS portal. So you will be using a SAS portal and putting information on the SAS portal for multi-step, and you don't need to use the SAS portal for any configuration in single step. So that's the major difference.
Great, thank you. So another question is, I don't see my eNode registered in the Google SAS interface, but SAS is on and active. Did this person miss something or miss a step?
Yeah, so the first thing they would want to check is if they're using single step or multi-step. So if they're using single step, like we just said, all the configuration is done on the ENodeB side. And when they turn the SAS on, what they can do is they can check which stage the ENodeB is in. And if it is stuck in a particular stage, like it's not getting registered, or it's not getting granted, or it's not getting authorized, then what they can do is check the SAS logs here. and they will see the dialogue between the SAS and the ENodeB, and then figure out from the latest message what's going on or what the error is. So if you are having a problem with registration, in the registration response, you will see an error code other than 0. So if you're seeing an error code other than 0 in any of the steps, that means there is an error. If there is no error, then you should see the response code as 0. So that's your first indicator. If you're using a multi-step, again, same thing, make sure that all the parameters are correct on the Google side and the ENodeB side, and then come back to the logs. If you don't see them registering, check the log and see if you are finding any response code other than 0. And from there, you can go on and start troubleshooting. So usually the most common error response code is for the registration step, you'll see a 103, and it will specify, it will say that, okay, your FCC ID is wrong, or it will say that it cannot find your FCC ID, or it may say that your EIRP is max EIRP is wrong. It's not in the range that the FCC ID was granted for. So there are a bunch of errors, and it will spell out exactly what the error is. So you can troubleshoot it that way.
Great, thank you. So the next question, they see that you're showing Google SAS. Is the procedure the same for common scope SAS?
Yes, so the single step and the multi-step are same. The portal, the GUI would look different. And then the settings that you would do, the amount of settings that are needed on multi-step on the portal side would be the same like what we just saw on the Google side. It's just that the GUI will look a little different. Jason, if you want to add something, you can as well on this point. Do you see any major differences between CommScope and Google SAS portal? Jason? Okay, looks like Jason is having some trouble, but yeah, your basic bare bones are the same for the Google SAS and the CommScope. It's just that the GUI and the overall feel will be different. Yeah. There are no additional steps that you need to follow for CommScope or Google. Just make sure though that when you're using CommScope, the SAS provider is CommScope instead of Google. That's the major thing. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And yeah, it looks like Jason got cut off, so I don't see him on, so we'll get back to him. Moving on to the next question. What are the prerequisites before onboarding Baicells, ENB, CPEs to SAS Setup?
So the main requirements are that you be a CPI, you need to be a certified professional installer, and then you need to have your CPI ID, CPI name, and CPI certificate and password handy. So before you start the procedure, you need to be sure that you have access to all this information, and then you also have an account with your SAS provider on their SAS portal. So if you're using CommScope or Google, you need to make sure that you have your own account, and your account is set up with your CPI certificate and the CPI password and username. Once you have your certificate and your SAS portal is set up, then you're good to go. You can start onboarding using the Baicells equipment. So those are the prerequisites.
Great, thank you. Next question. If you lose authorization to transmit from SAS due to incumbent use in the DPA, is there an auto reassign and non-use frequency so that you don't have to babysit the ENB or wait for the CPAs?
Good question. So on the current software, we do not have the feature that makes this part of your life easy where you have an incumbent. But in the next software, most likely, if there are no bugs and if the stability is fine, which will release towards the end of this month, what you have is you have a multi-grant feature. So what happens is that when you get a grant from the ENodeB, the ENodeB also asks for a subsequent grant, which is for a different frequency. And then when it goes back to the authorized mode rather than the transmission and asks for a different grant, if the other grant is available, it just picks up that other grant, and then you're good to go to the transmission state and not have to completely relinquish and then deregister and babysit, as you just said. So you have a standby grant there. So there is a multi-grant feature that we are working with, which will solve this issue where you have when you face an incumbent.
Great, thank you. Next question. If we use one radio with 2 antennas, how does that get set up with a SAS interface?
Right. So that you would do for a 436Q. And again, the same software that we just talked about will have a multi-registration feature as well as multi-grant. So in multi-registration feature, so here you're seeing only one set of parameters, right? So what happens in that software is you will see two sets of parameters. So basically you're making it work as if there are two separate ENodeBs and not one single ENodeB. So they're going to have two different registrations, two different grants, and be authorized separately. So they're working on different channels or the same channel if you want, and are having a different process altogether, but on the same page. So you don't have to make the configuration twice. It's just that you have an ease from from the same GUI. You can select two different channels and then antenna gains because you have two different antennas and everything. So you're basically having two sets of parameters to configure. So it will work like two different ENodeBs. But yeah, expected to come around the end of the month.
Great, thank you. Next question. Where do we get the user ID, CPI ID, and the CPI name details from?
Right. So when you have registered yourself with a SAS provider or SAS vendor like Google, and once you are done with your CPI certification, they will give you a user ID, they will give you a CPI certificate, CPI ID, CPI name. So all those will be given to you once you finish your CPI training from a SAS vendor. So that's one of the prerequisites, as we discussed earlier, that you need to have this information before you start onboarding your equipment. So all that will be provided to you by your SAS vendor.
Great, thank you. Next question. What is the max transmit power on the Nova 233 Gen 1?
So for Gen 1, right now it is 46 dBm per 10 megahertz, but we know that the category B is 47 maximum. So we are going through the recertification process. We can expect that also by the end of the month. So that's the only ENodeB that is left for recertification to go from 46 to 47 dBm per 10 megahertz. Rest all the ENodeBs are now certified with the maximum power. So 436Q, the 227, the Gen 2 233 are all certified with the max power. It's only the Gen 1 that's pending, and it's already in the testing with the lab, so we should expect it anytime soon. So right now it's 46 to answer the question.
Okay, thank you. Does it matter if you use 2 feeds per antenna with V and H poles, or use 1 feed to each of 2 antennas, both with a V polarity?
Sorry, can you repeat that question again?
Yes. Does it matter if you use 2 feeds per antenna with V and H poles, or use 1 feed to each of 2 antennas, both with
Angela?
polarity?
Hello?
Yes, can you hear me, Natisha? Natisha, can you hear me? Hello, Natisha, can you hear me? Do you need me to repeat the question? Do you need me to repeat the question?
Yeah. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Does it matter if you use 2 feeds per antenna with V and H poles, or use one feed to each of two antennas, both with V polarity?
So you have to, so if this is again for a 436Q, because that's the only one where you can connect two different antennas. So you need to have two feeds to one single antenna. So you cannot have one feed from one, you cannot have like one feed from one antenna to a port, and then the second feed from the same antenna to a different section, like one feed to a primary cell and a second to a secondary cell. You cannot do that. You need to have two feeds to a primary cell and two feeds to a secondary cell. So you need four feeds in total if you are using a DC mode, and CA mode as well, actually.
Great, thank you. When will the 436Q in DC mode with multiple antennas be supported?
Yes. So as we discussed earlier, that will be coming most likely by the end of this month, which will have a multi-registration feature.
Great, thank you. What needs to happen on the UE after SAS is working on the ENodeB? Are you able to show these settings?
So right now on the CPE, hang on, let me see if my connection is still intact to my lab. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment there. Angela, my screen is stopped, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So 1 second. I'm having a little bit of a trouble reaching my lab setup right now. Oh, okay. So I lost my VPN connection. Hang on, guys.
In the meantime, if there are any more questions, please go ahead and type them in the Q&A section. While we're waiting, there is another question if you're able to answer it, Natisha.
Sure, go ahead.
It says, do UEs have to be configured separately before ENB is enabled in SAS?
So you can onboard them on SAS, but you should always have the ENodeB first connected to SAS before you connect the before you onboard the UEs to SAS. But like if you're using multi-step, right, you can input all the information on the SAS at the same time. It's just that when you want to enable SAS on the CPE, wait for the ENodeB being attached to SAS first, and then enable the SAS on the CPEs. So yeah, you can onboard them, but just don't turn on the SAS until the ENodeB is first onboarded and connected to SAS and working.
Okay, and then do the UE connections drop?
Yes, the UE can because the ENodeB is rebooting. So at that time when the ENodeB is rebooting, all the connections will be dropped. And then once the ENodeB comes back online, all the CPEs will connect back, even though they're not enabled with SAS, because they're on the same frequency, they're working. And to make them work with SAS, you have to turn SAS on the CPEs. But the time when the ENodeB is rebooting, yes, all the CPEs will drop. Okay, so I'm gonna turn on my screen again. Let's see, I have screen 2. Okay. All right. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it is.
So right now I don't have any, so we use the 436Q and I don't have any CPEs connected, but I am on a different ENodeB and can reach a different CPE. So remember, the CPE is not connected to SAS right now. It's just connected to an ENodeB, which is also not working on SAS. So I will not be turning on the CPE SAS, but I will show you what settings you can do. So this is a Cat6 CPE. It's also on a beta software, by the way. So you go to System, and then you go to SAS Settings. And then, so right now SAS is disabled. You click on Enable, and you can choose again single step, multi-step, and then you have to fill in all the information like you did exactly for the ENodeB, right? So for single step, you have your user ID, your FCC ID, your serial number, antenna gain, your longitude, latitude, and then your CPI ID, your CPI information, all those things. But there's one disclaimer. This is the beta software, so I have both single step and multi-step. But in the GA software that we are going to use, the CPEs will only have multi-step. They don't have single step. So the ENodeBs have both single step and multi-step, but on the GA CPE software, which will be released soon, will only have multi-step. So you will not see this option in the GA software. Right now I'm on a beta software, that's why you're seeing this. But yeah, and then also the FCC ID will be pre-programmed, so you don't need to worry about putting the FCC ID in. So on the GA software, the serial number and the FCC ID and the antenna gain will all be pre-populated. All you have to do is put your user ID in and select the category. That's all you need to do. And when you apply and save that, it will start the process like we just saw for the ENodeB. But so here, instead of the ENodeB, you will go to the CPE tab, and under the CPE tab, you will see all that information. So for example, since I did not save it, it will not be registering, but it will have the same flow wherein it will go from unregistered to registered to granted to authorized and transmission. So that's how the CPE registration will work. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Natisha. Looks like those are all the questions that we have, and that's pretty much all the time that we have. So thank you for doing the demonstration and being the presenter for today's webinar, and for all the attendees for attending. Please be on the lookout for the email containing the recorded webinar, and if you do miss that email, it will be on our YouTube channel. Again, thanks everybody for attending. Have a great one.
Thanks, Angela. Bye. Thanks everyone for attending.